often come across a proverb, is an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Have any of you ever heard that phrase before? Sometimes it might show up on social media or some aspirational slide with a group of people huddled with their arms around each other, looking off into the horizon. Or perhaps there's a group of people with their hands in the middle of a circle about to say, "Go team!" And that phrase shows up. Yeah, well, I sometimes find that phrase a little challenging for me specifically, because there are times when I've done stuff alone and it is not fast. It's not fast at all. In fact, if I don't know what I'm doing, or if I'm overwhelmed, or simply just bored, I go pretty slow. It's pretty slow. And on the flip side, the times that I've been going together with a group of people, I'm often the one pulling and pushing people along. And so it doesn't actually, enliven me. It's actually quite exhausting. So that proverb doesn't always suit my needs as a leader. Uh, I'll give you an example. So, several years ago, I used to be a regional director of learning for a large corporation. I'd been on the team at this point about 5 years, and each year, our boss put together this wonderful in-person annual meeting for the team. Now, the team was small, there were about 6 of us on the team, but he did such a lovely job. I really think it was a gift for us to organize all of these different elements of our 3-day event. Well, at that 5-year mark, I got promoted to the lead regional director. And one of those tasks that came under my promotion was to be the person to organize that annual meeting. When he told me that, I actually felt stressed. I didn't like the idea. I just didn't like the idea of having to plan an event. Certainly knew that I wasn't going to do it as well as he did, and I was overwhelmed. But I didn't want to let on. It's a new, it's a promotion. It was a new role, and I didn't want to let him down. But I also didn't tell him exactly how much support I needed. But what I did instead was actually complain and whine about it for a while, mostly to my mom, and just told her how stressed I felt and how overwhelmed I felt. And that was just a form of procrastination, let's call it. Eventually, I ended up mentioning it to a friend of mine. And my friend Tammy, when she heard me say how stressed and overwhelmed and uncertain of how to approach this, she asked me a very interesting question. She asked, "Valerie, how would you want to feel instead about this project?" And my instinct was responding very quickly, I'd like to feel like I don't have to do it. I'd like to feel like I can say no. But she said, "No, no, seriously, how would you prefer to feel?" And in that moment, I thought, well, I'd like to feel freedom and ease and fun. I like my team. They're good people and I want to do a good job. And plus, Tim has done this over and over for years. I don't want to let anybody down. I don't want this time to be a dud. So the question, though, really prompted me to start thinking about what behaviors would I have to take on in order for that meeting for me to feel free, ease, and fun. And sure enough, as I started to think about it, I realized that for me, freedom meant I wouldn't do it alone. I actually did want to have the partnership of my team. And for ease, I'd want to delegate all the different portions of the session of that annual meeting that made sense for my team. And the fun began when I started to match up the right person with the right task. And so, because I knew my team so well, every single one of them, once I told them what that task was, they were thrilled to do it. The meeting went incredibly well. I was so proud of us. Now, in that moment in my career, I learned a really important message. And the message for me was leadership is not a do it yourself project, it's not a DIY project. Now, you might think that from that phrase that this is all about finding the right team or delegating to the right person. But actually, The real hero in this story is my friend Tammy, because what she did in that moment was provide me with some emotional support, but she also challenged me to look at something from a different perspective. And that's a huge lesson. Look, I've struggled for many years as a person that didn't want to ask for help, just powered through and got things done on my own and was miserable most of the time, right? And so for me now, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to support leaders in finding the freedom, the support, and also joy in doing things, especially the hard things. So, are you one of those people? Are you finding that you're struggling sometimes with doing something on your own and not getting the results that you want? Trying to DIY all elements of your life? Are you also finding that you can't really ask for help or you're having a hard time figuring out who to ask? Okay, well, I'm here to provide exactly what you need. I've created a framework. I call it the circle of influencers. Circle of influencers, just like this. Yes. The circle of influencers is not the influencers that you find on Instagram, right? But I call them influencers because they influence our thoughts, they influence our actions, sometimes they even influence our energy. And the idea of a circle is simply that support is not linear. It can come from all over at different times, but always meets us wherever we are. Now, in this circle of influencers, there are 4 different roles, and I will introduce you to each of these roles, explain exactly what they are. And then you'll start to think of people who you think might fit these roles. But in order for that to be effective and for you to have any, for it to have any relevant application, you need to identify an area of your life that you've been trying to DIY it and just haven't been doing, you haven't been going fast or you haven't been going far enough. Can you think of something? Perhaps as organizing an event, like in my case, or perhaps there's a big project that you just haven't had the energy to tackle. Maybe there's something that you haven't been sure how to do. You wanted to start your own business, or perhaps you wanted to do something special for a graduation or a wedding, or right? So think of something that you would probably DIY it, or you have been, and it hasn't gone well. That's exactly the area or the goal that this circle of influencers could be helpful with. Okay, everybody have something down? I would recommend you write it down too, just so you can keep this front of mind. One of the second steps that would be helpful is also identify anyone that you have already talked to about that project. Perhaps you have been getting some support or some guidance from some people. Maybe you've been complaining about it like I did with my mom. Write those names down. Sometimes it's helpful just to see where exactly you are in building your own circle. Because now, as I introduce each of those frameworks, and I introduce the framework with each of the roles, you'll start to see who's missing. You'll start to see who you might be able to reallocate to a different role. Okay, you ready? There are four different roles within the circle of influencers. Here are the 4 roles. So you can see that we have the parallel, the connector, the supporter, and the challenger. We're going to go through each one of those so that you're clear on how to distinguish between each one. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the parallel. Okay, the parallel person, here we go. If you can see that, maybe, here we go. The parallel person in a circle these are individuals who can also be with you in on your journey. They may have already been there, done that. Perhaps they're right in it with you. So in the case of an event planning, for example, there's somebody that has already planned an event that was similar or a large scale event. Or perhaps if you're talking about something like reorganizing your garage, maybe someone that has done that type of project before. Now, the thing about this particular role is that you're able to get either inspiration from them because they've done it in a way that maybe is attractive to you, or you might get some support in doing it with them as a partner. I belong to a mentorship circle for entrepreneurs. And in our circle, we meet once a month. Earlier on this year, we had a gentleman who had been working really hard on establishing his nonprofit. With all the changes that were happening in the government, unfortunately, a lot of the funding that he was relying on for his nonprofit started to go away very quickly. So he came into our session and he was so upset, really discouraged about everything that was happening. And instead of this being a pylon about all the things that were going wrong and how unfair it was, the power of the parallel really showed up when all these other entrepreneurs, we were all there to also build our own business and overcome challenges, started asking him questions like, well, what have you done so far? Where else could you find funding? Have you read that article in Fortune magazine about fundraising? Like we started talking about all these elements that could help him redirect his energy and focus on what he actually wanted to accomplish. Sure enough, the advice he got by the end of that session, he had a whole different relationship to all the changes that were coming his way. Now, your turn. Take a look at that goal that you wrote down earlier and identify, are the people that you have already connected with, would they be considered a parallel member? If not, think of some names that you could add to that list. Who else is doing something similar? Who else has kind of experienced what you would like to accomplish? Okay. And it helps to distinguish if you write the letter P next to each of those names so that you're clear which of these roles that person is best able to serve you. Okay, ready for the next one? The next one is called the connector. You can see that here. Yes, connector. So the connector in the circle, this is the person that can help expand your reach. They share the resources to get you access to different people or different things. Now, I host a podcast, and the podcast is called the Circle of Hope podcast. Recently, I interviewed a woman. Her name is Chef Yadira Stamp. And Chef Yadira actually is from the Republic of Panama, just like me. And as she was working on her doctorate degree, she wanted to focus all of her studies on food sustainability and indigenous cuisine. And part of her thesis and her research involved actually learning about the cooking methods and ingredients and the lifestyle of indigenous tribes in Panama. Now, her access to that was very limited. She didn't know a whole lot other than what she could, find on internet. So she started going to travel agencies. And with travel agencies, she kind of hit a wall. Most of them said in order for her to have the kind of lived experience that she was looking for in her research, she needed to get permission from a tribal chief. And she didn't know anybody. So then she did the next best thing. Chef Yadira started to crowdsource on social media. She started asking people if they had any connections to any indigenous communities in Panama, and if so, they could send them her way. Sure enough, she started receiving names, links, information. In fact, one of the links that she got was for a chef who's also Panamanian. And when she went to his account, she noticed a photograph of him standing in front of his restaurant with a group of people dressed in indigenous attire. So she reached out to him and asked, hey, do you happen to have contact with the tribal chief of this group, of this tribe? And he said, yes, they connected. He was able to support her in meeting the right person. And by the end of the project, Chef Yadira she spent months and met 4 different tribes in the Republic of Panama out of the 8. So she did amazing, not only finding connector with crowdsourcing online, but also that individual who could give her access. So flipping it back to you, think about that goal that you have or that challenge that you want to address. Are there any people on your list who could serve as a connector? If so, put a C next to their name. You might also add some extra names too, if you think of them. You don't have to know the person. Just like Chef Yadira did, she went online. So sometimes it's a matter of who could you reach out to that seems to be in the know, who seems to be well connected, perhaps is following or has a lot of followers. All right, ready for the next one? The third element of your circle is going to be supporter. You want supporters in your circle. Supporters are the individuals who provide you with the emotional support, emotional encouragement, and reassurance. Because it's inevitable, there's going to be times when you just need a break and someone to help kind of help blow steam, or maybe you want to celebrate something. So, supporters are people who are wonderful to have in your corner because they listen. They may not provide you with any material or tangible resources, but they provide you with the internal emotional resources. My niece, Tayani, graduated from high school a few months ago, but the beginning of her senior year was actually very difficult. Tayani's best friend passed away, and having such a tragic event at any age is very difficult, but specifically at that point in her life. And so as she got closer and closer to graduation, she started having a lot of doubts and a lot of uncertainty about what she would do next, where she would study, what career she should follow. And me, as her coach, wanted to support her, wanted to help in any way I could. So I actually introduced her to a friend of mine. Tayani had also completed her cosmetology certification. So the friend that I have, she had run a salon. She had also been a stylist and now is a real estate agent. So I figured this would be an opportunity for Tayani to get some career coaching or mentorship. Well, when I followed up with my niece after that, she said one of the most meaningful parts of that connection with my friend wasn't so much the career conversation, but she learned that my friend had also lost a friend while she was in school, her best friend, in fact. And they had an opportunity to bond over that shared loss. And my niece also discovered that part of the pain that she was in and the lack of clarity that she had was a sense of guilt about moving forward without her best friend by her side. That's the power of the supporter. Now, you may not have such tragic circumstances, but sometimes it's wonderful to address some of the things that are happening on the inside before you start managing all the things on the outside. So take a look at your list and identify who are the people who are great listeners, who encourage you. Write an S next to their name and add some people to this list as well. Sometimes you may want to just have a good laugh. Who are the people that make you laugh? Who are the people who are just really emotionally connected and provide you with empathy? Those are the people you want as your connectors, as your supporters. Okay, ready for the final role in your circle of influencers. Here you go. The final role is the challenger. So, the challenger, this is going to be an interesting one because challengers are there to encourage your growth and they challenge our thinking as well as some of our behaviors. So it's not always comfortable. So I always say, make sure that when you're looking for challengers, you're looking for people who are not critics, who are not cynical, but they care about you and they want to see you do better. But perhaps they just have a different approach than what you would typically do. For example, I've been working with a coaching client and he works for a large tech company. This tech company has had massive layoffs and has continued to do a lot of reorganizing in the last 12 months. So much so that my client has experienced 5 different reorgs. And that meant a new boss, new team, sometimes new priorities. And what he did was he found himself talking to a lot of people who were going through the same thing, either in other tech companies or even on his own team. And the more and more he talked to them, he shared with me the worse he felt, the more fear, the more anxiety that created for him, because all of them were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're always waiting for something else to happen and when it was going to be their turn. And so in our conversation, I introduced him to the idea of the challenger in the circle of influencers and asked them, are there people in your life who you know think differently and would approach things, this particular thing, in a different way? Specifically, people in the tech industry. And sure enough, he thought of a couple of people who'd been his mentors in the past. And when he reached out to them, yes, they had a different take on all of the changes that were happening in the industry. In fact, they were looking at innovations, they were looking at different pivots, and those conversations started to help him spiral up instead of the downward spiral that he'd been in. That meant that he now could see some opportunity and not just all the threats. Now, your turn. Take a look at your goal and notice, are there people on that list that you've written so far that could be good challengers for you? If so, put a CH next to their name. Now, here's the thing about challengers. Be real picky. You don't have to allow just anybody to be your challenger. And the better direction you give them about what to challenge, the more effective they are. Okay, there you have it. You have all four in the circle of influencers: parallel, connector, supporter, and challenger. You may find, though, that you do not have names for every single category, and that's okay. The idea of the circle of influencers is not just about amassing a whole bunch of people, about a bunch of contacts. It's about being thoughtful and curating a group that can meet you where you are. So you don't have to try to do things on your own. If you notice you have an abundance of some people, right, some types of some roles in your circle, and you have some scarcity or gaps in other roles, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So that all that tells you is that the gaps are places where you now can be more intentional about reaching out to others. So if you're noticing that, hey, you know what, I don't really have anybody that's a great supporter right now. Okay, well, that may mean that you look at other people on the list, and guess what? Your connector could probably find a supporter for you. Or you might find that some people play multiple roles, as I said. So part of it is maybe asking them to participate in a different way. Now, the way you activate your circle, because it's not enough just to have a list of people. They're not going to magically begin to provide you with all the things that you want. But there are three ways that you start to activate the circle. And their three ways are: you want to appreciate, invite, and contribute. All right. So appreciate. Let people know if they're in your circle, let them know what you appreciate about them. What have they done for you? Have they provided you with the support you needed, a great listening ear? Have they maybe changed your mind about something, shifting your perspective as a challenger? Let them know what they've done and the impact they've had. The reason that appreciation is a great way to activate your circle is because it helps people know how they can continue to support you in the future. So what we appreciate appreciates. It grows. Okay, the second one, you want to invite someone to participate in your circle now. Now that might mean you invite someone new. Perhaps you have some new names of people that you could reach out to. Or you might want to invite someone to participate in a different role than they've been accustomed to. And there's a very simple way to invite someone. Tell them what you're working on. So either two things would happen. You share what you're working on, and they say, oh my gosh, I know someone I can introduce you to that's also done the same thing. Boom, they're your connector. Or they might say, oh my goodness, I'm doing something very similar. Can we do this together? Boom, they become your parallel, and so on and so forth. So sharing with people what you're up to will have so many ways. It provides them with a lot of options to support you, and you'll also start to see who you might be able to request specific guidance or support from. Okay. The last one is contribute. A true circle is not complete until you also give. Part of the activation of the circle of influencers is that you're not just receiving, but you're also giving to others. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be a quid pro quo. You might find someone else outside of your circle to provide to maybe you have resources that you can share. Perhaps you can be someone that joins in with them as a parallel, or listen to them when they need some to vent or they want to share a wonderful accomplishment. So find at least two people in your circle that you can appreciate, two people that you can invite, and two people that you can contribute. The main lesson here is leadership is not a DIY project. If you want to go fast and far, you want to surround yourself with the right people. And I encourage you to take some baby step in the next 24 hours now that it's fresh. Yes? Look, Just remember, life is never a solo journey. I bet you, whether it was conscious or unconscious, that you have had a team at work. Anywhere you go in any area of your life, there's been a team. You may have seen them and you may not have seen them. You may have invited them to participate, but somebody's opened doors for you. Someone's introduced you to someone else. Someone's shared some resource that was helpful for you. Your circle has always been there. Now, with this information, you know you have the ability to pursue your most important goals or your most challenging or your greatest challenges because you surround yourself intentionally with the people who can support you to thrive and grow. So make sure you go together with the right people, and you'll be amazed how you bring your circle to life.